Hey, welcome back to Azure CLI. My name is Jay Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Jay Gordon, and this is AzureFunBytes. This is number 3, and I really appreciate you watching again. It is really fun to be doing this show. Let's talk a little about what we're doing today, all right? I've got a guest. We're going to enjoy the stylings of Steve Morawski. He is been with Microsoft a while. He's one of the people that I can say has been really helpful to me while I've been at Microsoft. I really appreciate him giving me some time today. So what did we do last time? We talked about Active Directory. And while that was cool, that's just one thing about Azure that we're going to talk about in this series of Azure Fun Bites. And the big thing that I want you to always remember about how this show is going, and I've even kind of upped my game here, and whoa, you can see my hands now as I'm doing my things. I'm really trying to make sure that this is fun, that I'm getting you involved, that you're getting something from it. So I really hope you are. Steve's going to join me in just a second. But before he does, I want to...
Let's get it.
I really want to show you this week's video before we go ahead and get into it, if you will. So let's go ahead and give it a shot, all right? I'm going to show you this week's video, and then we're actually going to talk a little bit about the subject and everything else related to Cloud Shell, and a little bit about what Steve is up to. All right, so let's get rid of me.
Hey, welcome back to Azure Fun Bites. My name is Jay. The Azure Cloud Shell provides you with an easy command line interface that is familiar to users who've done CLI-based management in the past. Getting into a Cloud Shell is as simple as going into your browser and selecting the icon from the portal, or you can just navigate to shell.azure.com. You'll have access to both Bash and PowerShell to allow you to script and execute commands that allow you to create, edit, modify, and destroy resources right from the Cloud Shell. You'll also have access to many common development and open source tools, such as Docker, NPM, and even the MySQL client. Also included is the Azure CLI. This is the key to making all of your changes from the Cloud Shell. The Azure Command Line Interface is Microsoft's cross-platform command line experience for managing Azure resources. The Azure CLI is designed to be easy to learn and get started with, but it's powerful enough to be a great tool for building custom automation to use Azure resources.
I'm Stephen Morales, one of the cloud advocates here at Microsoft Azure. Azure Cloud Shell helps you work faster and easier. Say you're on the go and you need to log into one of your Linux servers via SSH. Or maybe you need to edit a file and get it checked into a Git repository. Azure Cloud Shell can help you do either one of those from almost anywhere in the world via a web browser.
Make use of the light version of Visual Studio Code right in the Cloud Shell so you can edit your code or drop log snippets when troubleshooting. Write scripts to execute complex jobs using many of your favorite languages right in the shell. Popular programming languages and environments like PowerShell, Bash, Go, Node, Java, and Ruby. Accessing the Cloud Shell is just as simple as a click in the browser. So why don't you go ahead and check out more documentation, or use this link below and you'll get $200 free credit to use Azure. See you next time.
Oh, I tried again to get this to look good. I got to figure out how to show video a little bit better. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about yourself, Jay?
I'm doing all right. It's been an interesting couple weeks. I think we're all trying to get used to the world right now and what it's like. And I think making time to do things like this and spend time with our friends here is great. So thank you very much for some of your time, Steve.
Oh, my pleasure. I love talking about this stuff and hanging out with friends like you. So
thanks.
Makes the day go, especially in this kind of remote world that we're in now. Right?
Sure. So before we get too into our subject, and I'm going to nerd up my view here a little bit for everybody. I'm going to add this side to the stream. Like I said, I just want to nerd it up a little. Might as well. I mean, if we're in our virtual world, we might as well try to do all these virtual things. That's the way I look at it. So anyhow, thank you so much. Let's first talk about what you've been up to lately. It's a different world for people like this, that do advocacy and evangelism and working with customers, building. I do it, you do it, but I'm curious how's it been for you lately?
Well, first off, I just want to acknowledge that we're pretty blessed. Our jobs are flexible enough that we can adapt to these kind of circumstances, and not everybody is as fortunate as we are to be able to work remotely from home with similar fidelity to a lot of our in-person kind of capabilities, right? It changes what we have to do, but I definitely don't want to come off as entitled here, because I know how blessed we are to have this kind of capability in our role.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's definitely a different experience, right? A large part of our job is being present with community.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different ways that we did that before coronavirus. Now we've mostly shifted to one aspect of that, which is a lot of the online engagement and figuring out how do we make that richer? How do we make that a better experience? How do we close some of the gaps where I can't get in person with you and have that richer level of communication?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how do I do it in a way that can reach, because our role is global, right? So for folks who aren't super familiar with our role at Microsoft and the advocacy team, our role is global. So we would go to events, across the world. So how do we also make sure that, because a lot of us are based in, either a lot of us are based in the U.S., a number of us are based in some other countries around major population centers. How do we also make sure that we get to where our community is? Because our community is global. Our community is not just in the handful of cities. Well, there's more than a handful across our team, but the number of cities that we're in. And so, I think we're seeing a lot of events adapting to online. And one of the things I really liked about the build experience, in addition to opening it up to everybody, was they reran sessions in time zones in time zones that would be friendlier across the world. And it's not going to be perfect for everybody, but in order to marshal enough presenters and enough traffic controllers and allow for Q&A time and changing up the length of sessions versus how things are happening, there's some major adjustments to how we would normally do events and how we would normally interact with our audiences. Yeah, I think it was a good experiment, and I think it was a good direction. I'm sure there's things that we can tweak and all, but it is changing what we do and finding ways that we can interact and be present outside of the time zone that we're normally awake and working is a challenge. Stuff like this, where we're going to persist this for future consumption. It's great for people who can be live. But then there's also an opportunity to catch up on it if you're in a time zone where this time wouldn't be friendly, right? So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do with this is the fact that we have an opportunity to reach a lot of people all over the place, and it won't always be on their time. But what you can do are find ways to either tune content so people can get it at any time they really want to, make it more on demand, and then have some sort of interactive piece that even if it's not live, they can still reach out to you. They can still get their questions answered and do the things they may want to with the things we present to people.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah. And that's a challenge. It's always been part of our job. But now it's become a much larger part now that we don't have that ability to go and spend that time with the user group or go out to that Ignite Microsoft Ignite the tour event and meet with people where they're at. Now we can meet with them where they're at virtually.
Now we've talked a little bit about what you're doing lately. Let me ask you a little bit about you. I know a little bit about you, but not everyone watching may know a little bit about you. And I think it's worth it to tell a little bit of your story. So
sure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit like how you got to doing what you're doing right now?
All right. So I like to say I followed the traditional path into IT. I owned a garden center, flower shop, and landscape business for 8 years. And then I went to work for a police department. Not the most popular of things these days, but I was training to be a police officer, and I was working as a clerk and a dispatcher and an auxiliary officer, and got to experience kind of that whole flow of work. Mm-hmm. Well, my boss there found out I knew a little bit about computers. So I took over IT for the department. My boss got a full-time position created to do IT for the agency, and I taught myself some programming and some automation. And that's kind of where I got into PowerShell. And that's what brought me into kind of more of an advocacy space. I started doing talks. I started, because I came into the field late. I was in my 30s when I started in IT. And I wanted to make sure that I took advantage of so many community resources to kind of get myself ready for the job that I had. I wanted to make sure that I was giving some of that back. So I started doing a podcast. I started speaking at conferences, going to different user groups. And that kind of flowed into a couple of different jobs. I worked for a public safety software company for a while, doing all sorts of stuff. Everything from pre and post sales engineering and training to writing code for for a web services API. But then I got back into systems administration, did a lot of early adoption stuff with Windows Server.
My heart.
And finally, or not finally, but then I moved over to Stack Overflow, and I was on the site reliability team at Stack Overflow, and I got bit with the bug for configuration management, and started working with PowerShell desired state configuration, doing a lot of talks and stuff about that. And finally, I got to from there. I went to Chef. And I actually started building tools and helping maintain open source tools for operations people. And so I worked on Chef. I worked on a lot of the cookbooks. I worked on Habitat and Test Kitchen, which are some tools in the Chef ecosystem. And got to spend some great time and really became part of a broader open source community there. And from there, I came to Microsoft with the chance to talk more about the operations side of DevOps and continue that conversation in the context of Azure.
Yeah, that's kind of how I ended up at Microsoft, which is kind of really awesome. And I think that's why it's really great that we kind of bring this circle together a little bit with this particular episode. And so thank you very much for some of your time today. And so I'm gonna switch some stuff around here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove that guy. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a screen. And I want to talk a little bit about what kind of things. Let me actually add it. Sorry. Still getting used to being, what we are nowadays, which is all virtual all the time. Being your own producer on top of all the other things is interesting. So it's a process.
Definitely.
So one of the tools that I really gravitated to right away when I started working with Azure was something that I looked at as an open door, if you will, like the Cloud Shell. It, to me, is kind of like an opening of a door to the rest of Microsoft Azure. You can do some things graphically, sure. You can do things with API calls. But for system administrators, and I'm going to ask you the way you feel, for me, starting out, command line tooling, it was always really the thing that just made sense to me.
Yeah, I'm a command line junkie. I love my command line and my shell environment. So for me, having Cloud Shell is, it's a great accelerator because I don't have to go figure out what I need to get, what tools I need to go get for my box. Right?
Yeah.
and regardless of whatever machine I'm on, and I don't need to figure out how do I authenticate it to Azure, and those experiences have gotten better over time. When Azure first came out back in the 2010-ish time frame, it was challenging getting tools to authenticate at first, right? Over time, the experience has gotten a lot better. But Cloud Shell it's just the shell with all the tools that you need authenticated into Azure for you, and you're just ready to go.
Yeah. And so today we're going to try to solve a couple problems with the Cloud Shell. That's kind of what we do here on Azure FunBytes. What we're going to do is go over 3 problems today. And the first problem that we're going to do, I think, is one of the easiest answers here. And it's, how can I reduce my local workstation requirements? Yeah. So you've been on call before, I'm going to guess, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm familiar. I've spent much time in PagerDuty rotations, or, back when I was at the police department, I was the only IT guy. So I was on call all the time.
So when you're on call, sometimes you've got a minimal set of tools available to you. Maybe you're at a party and you've got a browser, but maybe the VPN's not working. Something isn't working that you're really expecting, that you need right away, anytime, anywhere. And so I think this is where, for me, the Cloud Shell makes a lot of sense. For the first reason, more than anything, all you need is a browser. And it's even built into the Azure iPad application and the iOS app. And is there an Android
as well? Yep.
So anywhere you go, it doesn't really matter. You have the opportunity to be able to administrate your servers. And things like remote desktop, of course, you can use a local application, but you can go ahead and, if you're on the fly, set things like firewall connections right on the fly when you need to, punch that hole if you need to get in the specific server, whatever it is you need to do. I think it's really awesome we have these tools available to us. So I wanted to try to show people today, and after I kind of start the first thing, Steve, I want you to help me down on the road, if you will. Okay?
Sure thing. Yeah.
So the first thing I want to talk about is, say I work at a company. I'm currently on call, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that on-call rotation right now is I'm getting an alert. Now, that alert is that I'm having a problem, okay, with, let's say, I don't know, one of my services here. So I have, say, a MySQL service, right? So I have an opportunity to go ahead and work with that MySQL service and not necessarily need to have a terminal on my computer. Mm-hmm. I don't need to log into anything special. All I really need to do is make use of the Cloud Shell. So we're going to kind of take a look at that first in the easiest, simplest way. How do I reduce the workstation needs? So let's take a look. Brett's got a question, and maybe why don't you tackle this one, Steve?
Sure. So the question is, do you think there's a bit of a hurdle for Windows admins who are predominantly GUI IT ops folks in this brave new CI and pipelines world? Yeah, it's a big shift. It's a big paradigm shift, but it's not an unexpected one. I mean, PowerShell and PowerShell's been around now for 11, 12-ish years in its released form. Mm-hmm. Earlier than that in previews, and there's been a large movement of folks saying, "Hey, move to the command line, learn the command line. If you learn this stuff, we will be able to move you forward in your career." And so yeah, it's a different experience and a different pattern of working. Mm-hmm. Now, once you're comfortable in the command line, when you start moving towards pipelines and stuff like that, it becomes a lot simpler, because most CI pipes, CI continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines, they tend to be command line runners. So if you can automate it from the command line, you can usually get it into a CI/CD workflow. So it becomes less of a transition there. There's still a transition of, instead of me running a command to go change something out in my environment, mm-hmm. I'm making a change to something in source control, and then that goes and does it. But getting comfortable in the command line really sets you up well for that transition. But it's a transition that we need to make. Now, one thing I think you're showing off here that helps in this scenario is we have the Cloud Shell command line to do stuff. but we do have a lot of capability to do stuff inside the Azure portal. So there is some UI experience around this, and sometimes having them side by side, or when you dock Cloud Shell inside the portal, if you have your browser window bigger and you got some space for that, they can be very complementary experiences, because I can be looking at and referring to information inside the portal as I'm starting to craft my command line.
I love doing that, and we're going to show one of the real power tools of doing, I think, that particular thing. So let me go back. I was just kind of flipping through to see what resources I have right now, and we'll just take a look at one right here. Let's say, like I said, I wanted to actually access this MySQL server. I have no clue what the password is, so we're not really going to log into it, but I want to show you what we are capable of doing here, because it's pretty cool. So to access the Cloud Shell, we can do it nearly in like 3 different ways right here that we're currently looking at. But the easiest way, right, is just this. And so we're already like authenticated. And that's one of the big things that I really like about this is the other ways of normally logging and starting our Cloud Shell, like you have to do this authentication bit, and we'll show that in a second. But you will have to do such an authentication bit that requires you to do it on your local computer. You have to make sure that you always know your passwords and all that stuff. You're on the go. You want to do something quickly. You're going to want to use the Cloud Shell just because it's going to reduce the amount of overall overhead for your workstation, right?
Yep, definitely.
So that's as simple as actually getting to our Cloud Shell. And we'll talk about the actual CLI that's built in the Cloud Shell the more we kind of work through this. So if I'm right, Steve, it's just kind of like MySQL is the binary. It's on there. So it seems like so easy to think about things being available to you. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you've got the MySQL tooling, you've got build tooling, you've got different runtime environments available there. You've got the Git client there, so that if you have a bunch of scripts and management tools and things somewhere, you can clone them down into Cloud Shell, and you have persistent storage. So one thing, I don't know if you've played around with it all, but Cloud Shell persists your home directory into Azure storage in 2 ways.
I remember the password.
Awesome. Cool, man. There's so in your home drive, there's a Cloud Drive folder, and that's persisted to an Azure file share. So you can mount that with any SMB client.
Oh, I've seen that. And so let's talk a little bit about that, is that these are file systems, just like you said. And so there are different file systems. So we have access to, say, just MySQL. We didn't need to install the binary on anything. If I know my username, I know my password, it's just there. So now I can start making modifications to my databases. Like I said, show databases. Great. And when I'm done, I'm done. And so there's no worried about cleaning any of it up. It's there. And so the other part of it that we always need to realize is that we still need to be able to SSH into things. And so Cloud Shell is secure storage, correct?
It's Azure storage, right? So it's as locked down as you make it there. By default, it's pretty secure. There are things you can do. It's tied to your credentials, and so based on what you've got, based on where in what subscription you've created your Cloud Shell environment, that's going to determine the default permissions that it inherits. But you can also, when you create your Cloud Shell environment, you can tell it to pick a certain storage account, an existing storage account that may be ACLed a certain way. You can tell it to create a new one, and then you can go in and change the ACLs later, right? So Cloud Shell, you have a container that mounts this cloud storage for your home drive. And there's the 2 things. There's the file share that I mentioned under the Cloud Drive folder in your home directory, but there's also the rest of the home directory itself, and that's stored as an image file in Blob Store, which gets mounted every time. And you can manipulate those how you need.
So what I just showed everybody was the fact that we have two different shares that I just utilized right here. These are two images, and both of these images provide you with different versions of the Cloud Shell that you can use. So I've got here, a Cloud Shell, and it's still the same like file system. It's just it's mounting it with a different Docker image.
No,
it's not an image.
It's the same image.
Oh,
and it's the same image. It's what shell do you start? So one starting the PowerShell 7 runtime currently, one starting Bash.
That makes so much sense.
So the Bash one starts up faster. So I always have the Bash one selected. But if I need to do PowerShell, you can just type pwsh and boom, you're in the PowerShell environment.
So I went into the portal and we can see here. And I also want everybody to see that we can do a lot of this looking up that we're doing. Let me minimize the shell for a second. A lot of this looking up that we're doing today for things in the portal, we could have just done within the Cloud Shell. And so the other thing you can do in your local computer, we talked about having it in browser, but we can also have it right here in Windows Terminal.
Yeah.
And so what I can do is go right here. And so I'm really enjoying Windows Terminal. I think it's a huge upgrade for people. Like I am a recent convert back to Windows. I have not been a Windows person, I don't know, like regularly, I don't know, maybe in like almost 15 years. We're talking now, a regular Windows user.
Welcome back. It's a new environment, man.
And it's completely, we're seeing just the integrations. And so the big thing, it's funny. I was talking to Donovan Brown a little bit recently, and I said the one thing that I've noticed is just you can set it up for a developer. It's just a different experience, but you have a really great development environment. Mm-hmm. Like even a person who's used to Linux or a Mac, I just think this is really useful. So you can see here, now there's the little bit difference that we did as compared to using the in-browser Cloud Shell, is that the in-browser Cloud Shell was just as simple as just this. And doing it specifically in here, this is going to allow me to get a little bit more power. So last week, you all know I created the Amaya Corp because I really like the show Devs. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see Devs yet?
Okay. No, I haven't.
It's a really weird show. So I'm going to be using the Microsoft tenant because that's where all the stuff I'm working with is. And so I can hit 0. And then I want to save it. Absolutely. So next time I don't have to reconfigure my shell settings. And so it's going to go ahead and it's actually going to connect to the same drive.
Yep.
And so let's blow everybody's mind here, right? So I'm going to go back here to Bash because I'm a Bash guy. And then what we'll do is so we can use code right in the browser. Not in this one. In the browser, we can use code. Excuse me. So I can go code, J, file, text, right? And then what I can do is just make some changes. And so code is another la-di-da, okay? La-di-da. We have like another super powerful tool built into this Cloud Shell that's in the browser. And so this is kind of the next step I wanted to talk to people about.
And so this is something I think that's pretty nice because if you're not as comfortable in the shell and you don't have magical Vim powers or Emacs skills, right? Those are typically what we would see for in-browser edit or for in-shell editing. There's a couple of other editors as well, but having this nice visual editor that's so familiar if you're a VS Code user is pretty cool.
Yeah, so we can actually close the editor here, and if we ever wanted to just open it up like a regular mini version of VS Code, you just type code dot, and you get almost like what we have here. And what's really cool, and so this is kind of the next iteration of this I want to show them, Steve, is you can open up the terminal here. And then what we can actually do in here as well is we can change the shell if we wanted to. I believe all we have to do is make a modification here, and we can eventually bring up the very same AZ CLI in here as well, if I'm right.
So if you go to your command palette, so Control Shift P or Command Shift P, and type Cloud Shell. There's
open bash Cloud Shell. So yeah, we get another open up. Yeah, sure. Let's open it up. Go for it. Woohoo!
Yeah, so it'll let you authenticate there, and then it'll
sure. So now we have another place. Sure. So now we just want to say we have another place that we can use the Cloud Shell from. I just want to show it. So we created this la-di-da file here, right? And so if we just, you see, I have that J file here, and so I'm going to just do it with Vim because we're both pretty elderly men at this point in our life. But here we go. The file's the same in the two places. And in the world of technology, you're one of us graybeards. I'm sure you will at one point hear us say about how it's not that hard to close Vim. At least maybe.
Right. I know my way out. I can get it. Exactly. I can get out.
But like as you see here, we can actually just use a visual version. We can close the editor, and that's that. So the first problem we kind of said is how do we minimize our workstation requirements? And you can see here, everything we probably could be to get things done is here. So let's go to GitHub. Let's go ahead and find our repo. I'll grab this one right here, just one of my really simple repos. We'll grab, clone, or download. You see I've got I'm going by SSH. I'm not going to do it via anything like the HTTP version because I want to show you that we have. So just make dir AFB. Let's go to AFB. Okay, so let's just show you Git Clone. Ooh. I'm still not getting used to which is the paste on the keystroke, so I still have to do that. I'm going to figure it out. I keep typing Control P, and it never works. So I'm going to figure out what actually pasted at one point. So
into Cloud Shell, Control Shift P.
Control Shift P. Okay, cool.
Yeah, just for it's a little different for the browser. If you were in your terminal, it would have been Control V would paste for you, or Control Shift V.
I knew I wasn't crazy. All right. Yeah. So you see that I used SSH Git, and for people to know, you saw that I had some SSH keys in the directory right here. So those SSH keys are the same ones here in our Cloud Shell version. And so the other big part that we'll talk about next, so the next question of the day, is how do I create resources with the Azure CLI and Powershell? So, Steve, I might need your help a little with the PowerShell part, if you don't mind, but I can show them a little bit the Azure CLI if that's cool.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And depending on what you do, because we haven't rehearsed this ahead of time, right? This is all fun and live. I may have a tip that can help folks get started with the Azure CLI. So
awesome. So if you want any stuff you want to share with everybody, you go ahead and put it in that comment. It's going to share it in everybody's links too. So if you have any stuff, like if you have a little code snippet you want to show me about, I don't know, just launching a VM with PowerShell, that'd be really rad to do. But we're going to start with just some bash snippets. And so about last year, I started this. You'll see it was from July 2nd. I started this series that I called like Cloud Shell Tips for Sysadmins, and the bash shell is what we'll work with. And why the bash shell? It's really for many system administrators, I think, a great entry into using the Cloud Shell. It's something that's on almost every single Linux server. It's on almost every Mac computer. Bash is a fairly recognizable and noticeable shell. And so, Steve, you have also the ability to share a screen if you want to, right? It has a share screen on the bottom as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
So if at any point you want to show me something as well, feel free to let me know and I'll bring you in. So we'll go over this first thing that we're going to do. So when we get started, like Steve mentioned before, you create storage, and the storage allows you, and it happens. Oh, thank you very much, Fred. Some do love PowerShell for life. I won't deny it. I hear it a lot. So we have this storage, and if we go ahead, if I'm right, it's just a file share right here. And so if this is it, this should be, there it is.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so there's two bits of that, right? So there's an image file which sits in storage, and then there is the cloud drive folder. So whatever you put in that cloud drive folder is exposed via that files share API, the file share. So you can interact with that subset in a higher performance way, and then if you need to make, if you want to interact with the image file, it's an image file you can pull down and mount and do stuff with and push back up into storage if you wanted to make changes outside of that cloud drive folder.
Sure. Okay. So we're able to work like within here and then upload, because there is an upload download function in here as well, which is really, really useful, because we talked about it before when we're on the road. If we maybe need to upload some sort of binary from an update, this could be really a game changer for us, especially getting around certain problems with VPNs or downloads, who knows. So we're going to work a little bit more now on some of the things we can actually start doing within Azure. So the most simple thing that I think we can do is just simply creating some resource groups. So I've got some things to do right here, some really easy resource group creation skill notes. If you want to follow along, you can go to, I believe this is part 3 of the Cloud Shell. So let me put this in our chat. Great. And so what you'll see is the very base start kind of thing that you need to do with Azure. So let's say part of the solving our problem is, how do I create resources with Azure CLI? But at the minimum, we need to create a resource group, because everything in Azure lives in a resource group. So right here you can see it's AZ group location, and so we can pick one of the number of different data center regions. We're just going to go with East US, because you know what, Steve, I have a bit of a East Coast bias. Maybe it's my Yankee fandom that just does it to me. So
I couldn't tell. It's almost like you live in the East Coast, right?
So we've got one here, Dev2 app. I'm just going to call it AFB stream, Azure FunBytes stream. And so now what that's going to do, what did I do wrong here? AZ group create. That's the other great thing about it's a command line. If you make a mistake, you get an error message. So it's not like you're wading through an entire failure through some sort of process. So AZ group create. And so what's really awesome is every time we create something, we get an output of what it is we create in JSON, but we don't only have to take it in JSON. And if we do, we can see AZ group. And what we can do is do help. And there's a section within here that you'll see called output. So we can look at the output in the man page if we want to, and there's all these different things of resources. So if we go AZ group create, help, we'll find the sub commands, and so there's this sub command of output, and that'll give you all these different ways we can actually output our stuff. And so let's just do it. Go ahead, Steve.
So Jay, while you're showing this help, this is where I think my tip might fit in nice. Try AZ find group.
AZ find group, sure.
Yep.
So this
what this is, it actually goes through and looks at activity that's happened against the Azure API endpoints and comes up with examples of real things that people do with commands that reference kind of your search criteria.
Okay.
So this is it's using AI to go over how the Azure APIs are actually used. So you can see some of the common use cases, and when you see auto-generate, like there's some that are included that are manually curated, but then you can see the auto-generated ones showing some examples of how you might use commands for AZ group. So you might do AZ find group create or something too. You can get some more.
So this is a little bit more intuitive, would you say?
So if you don't know AZ group to deal with it, resource groups, AZ find can help you find what subcommands and things, or if I did AZ find MySQL, right, I could find commands related to that, and that gives you kind of a jumping off place, as well as some quick examples of how those commands are used.
So like maybe AZ find
VM or
yeah. No, that makes more sense now. I get it. And this is what we're going to use next. Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to use something fairly close to this, but this is really, really useful because you know what? There are so many things that you might want to do directly through the API, and then I would imagine throw it into some scripts, or maybe even like some sort of CI/CD process to be able to kick off something. This is really useful. So now we know how to actually do API calls. But what we can do is now start adding some even specific things to our new group.
Yep.
So I've created our new group, and we'll go into our resource groups section. And what we'll see here is AFB stream. And so what we can do is now make changes. So we have tags, and I might want to make sure that this is when it's created, it's got a environment variable of dev. Okay, so we want to make sure everyone knows that environment is dev. The key is environment. The variable is dev, and that'll be useful if we're doing some sort of tracking, maybe some billing around cost centers, stuff like that. Makes sense, Steve?
Yep, definitely.
So what we can do?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I was going to do is show everybody, we can go ahead. I just need to change the name of our new resource group. And so it's just like that, AZ. And like Steve said, the one thing that's nice is that while you're doing things, you can keep the browser up. It gives you a graphical view of what exactly you want to impact or change or modify or create. So what I'm going to do is just grab the name of the tag. I'll just paste it in here. I got an extra quote. Let's get what did I do? AZ AFB. What did I do? Oh, I see. I'm always so used to typing AZ with everything. But okay, so there we go. So now we've added a tag, and if we wanted to add that tag and do the output as a table, the one thing that's really cool, it's idempotent, right? So that means if we do it and it's already happened, it's not going to do anything else other than what our updates were.
I'll just throw out a caution.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, yeah. There are occasions where with some services where the commands are specific or need a little bit of error handling around them. So for the most part, they are idempotent. So
I was going to mess around this, but I'd much rather see you build something. You want to show us
Sure.
how, like, you can, why don't you bring up your screen? I'm going to remove myself. And why don't you show me how to create a virtual machine within within PowerShell? I'd love to see that.
Okay.
And if anybody's got any questions, we'd love to have you part of the stream. Just kick up your resolution a little, I think. Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
All right. So I'm using the full screen version of Azure Cloud Shell here just to give us a little more screen real estate. So you can go to shell.azure.com and get a full screen view. But I'm also in now. So I'm in the Bash version, and I'm just going to show. I just normally hop over to PowerShell that way. And there we go. It's going to build up my Azure drive. So one of the cool things about PowerShell is we can expose structures as a drive, just like the file system. And so Azure get PS drive.
So that's mounting it there? Okay, so that's showing you the mounted drives in PowerShell too, during PowerShell, correct?
Yeah, so it's showing me the mounted drives here. And so now I have Azure as a drive that I can be in, and I can take a look and let's see. Azure recurse. Because I'm in because we're in cross-platform here, ls is always ls, and I need get child item or GCI, or I can use my tab complete. But it can iterate through, and these are my subscriptions that I have connected here. But we want to create a VM, so we want to do kind of what Jay just did with the Azure CLI. We're going to do it with Azure PowerShell. So we need a resource group. So I need a new AZ resource group. Now, if you don't know the commands, let's get this creating here. Name, we'll just call it resource group 1. We'll do location. I'm in Central US.
So is that a Brewers?
Yep.
You're a Brewers guy?
Yeah. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but when I do, got to root for the home team. So,
Absolutely. Where are you, more football, or do you have a sport?
Mixed martial arts.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I always played different stuff in high school and college. I wasn't really a basketball, baseball, football person. It's more rugby, wrestling, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right. So we got a resource group created. Now, if I don't know the command, I can do git command. Will help me. It's sort of like a which or a where and I can look for something around group, and I'm going to find all the commands that I have available that have group in them, and maybe I want to limit them to one of the AZ modules, right? And so I can find all the commands related, and maybe I wanted to have a noun of new, because I want to look for something new. PowerShell has a naming convention about it. And then this episode, this would be that's not noun, that's a verb. My English teacher would be so sad with me right now. There we go. So we can find out like all the new commands. We can figure out what using get command. We can search for what we need and see what commands we have to manipulate and do things. So I want to create a new VM, new AZ VM. We'll give it a name, Azure AzureFunBytes, MOPS, and it's going to want a credential. It's going to want a username and password to assign to the VM, because by default it's going to create a Windows machine. But we could. There's a lot more examples. I'll show you help in just a second. Just like all the help you showed us. I have to give it a resource group, and that was going to be RG. And Azure FunBytes. They'll like that. And new AZVM has some helpers in it to create some of the child resources that you'll need for the VM. So it'll create the subnet, the virtual NICs. Oh, yeah. It also tries to map RDP out for you, which is denied in this particular subscription. So,
okay.
But you can create examples of actually kind of the help actually has a really good and the help is available online or in the shell, and I'll show you in the shell in just a second. But in the help online, for example, they give you a whole example of how do I create the virtual network, the IP address, the network interface, and how do I bring that all together inside of a construct and then give that to new AZVM to deploy the specific thing that I'm looking for. And so I can get that same help with get help, from in PowerShell, and we'll do new AZ VM. That will give us a link to the online docs. It will give, it gives us some syntax. There's a lot of syntax for this because there's a lot of different ways that we can call it. And then gives us a short description. Now we can ask for more help. So that's the default. We can get, there's detailed, there is full, and there's syntax, where and you can just get examples as well.
Mm-hmm.
So can help. Here we'll see the same thing, but it also walks through each of the in the full help. It walks through each parameter, gives you an example, gives you if it's required or not, if it accepts wildcards, the type of data that it's expecting. And so we walk through each individual credential here. We get some examples as we move on. We can specify open ports to tell it not to open, RDP to the internet like I was trying to do and got smacked down. We can assign tags as you showed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we get to some examples. And so these are the same examples that we see online. And in the shortest form, we have the new AZ VM and tells us what we're going to go do. We have that longer example, so you get that same help right in the shell that you get from docs.
So I think the reason you're getting some of those errors is just because we actually have some really cool security around what we do at Microsoft, and so we're not allowed to actually create these VMs if they're just open to the world.
Yep.
And
I did it to myself.
Yeah. Oh, it's no big deal. The great thing is there are flags that we can work with to make some changes, and we can always just create our VMs with those particular flags. So I've just been playing around with stuff, and what I want you to see is going to be a part of our final problem we're going to fix. All right. So I've got this resource group, and within here, there's a static web app that I created, and I'm done with it. I don't need it anymore. It's really, really simple to go ahead and delete it. Now, if I don't want to actually look it up using the browser, I could have just done what Steve did and just bring up a Cloud Shell by going to shell.azure.com. I could just do something here in my either my Linux WSL VM, or even like my PowerShell, my Azure CLI. We've got all these like options, and they're all unified across a single resource manager, ARM.
Yeah.
And that's what's incredible. No matter where we do these things, the Azure Resource Manager is going to say, yep, you can do it. If you're authenticated, you have the right commands, you can do what you need. So I created this resource group here for RicoPug. So what if I could do is do an AZ group list. And so that's going to give me a listing. And we can actually, it's going to come out as JSON first. And we're going to get wrapped up soon. We're going to go ahead and finish this up. And I just want to finish it up with showing you how to delete, how to destroy. So what we can do is do AZ group list, output, and we'll do it with table because it just makes it easier to see everything. So what I'm going to do within here is I'm going to delete this RicoPug resource group. I don't need it anymore. And so deleting resources in the bash version using Azure CLI is as simple as AZ group, if I can type group right, delete. Then what we're going to do is give the name. And in the case, the name is RicoPug. And so I just call it RicoPug. And then what we're going to do is, like a lot of things that are smart, we're going to get a yes or no. Like good software that does destruction should do this. I mean, even if you do a delete in the portal, it asks you first. Well, if we're going to be really mean about it, and so we can basically do the same thing again. And what we could do is just hit -Y. And that's going to be like a force. Yes.
Yep. PowerShell will do the same thing. It'll ask you, hey, do you want to do this? It's PowerShell commandlets have a common parameter. So there's a common way that happens across all the PowerShell commands, similar to how it's happening here.
So what's that? Oh, okay. Brett, using the pipe to JSON is yeah, that's the one of the things. These are super useful tools that are practical, and that's why we're going to use it. And so what I want to show while that's running is that I can actually bring up another version of the shell if I really want to. I can just do it like this, or I can type shell.azure.com. It'll authenticate. It'll bring up my shell. And so I can select the directory. It'll mount my storage just like it did in this individual browser. And so what we're going to do is actually just look at the status of the command that's running. And so we can just do an AZ group list again, and we can see right there the current status is deleting. So this is how we solve our final problem. How do we delete resources that we've created in Azure? Just like that, we'll show you the command again. AZ group delete -- the name of the resource group. You can also delete individual resources within that resource group if you really want to. And I believe that's just under the individual commandlet for that particular resource. If I'm right, it would be something like AZ storage.
Yeah.
And then what we would do is like AZ storage list. Same thing. Oh, no, is it not? This is it show or no account. So now that's working another command. So let's look at that help. And so now we can go and start looking at the different. So yeah, there we see the storage delete. So let's do account show, and we'll do our show with output table. What are our IDs? Oh, we actually need the ID for to show it? Or no, we want a list. Is that right?
Yeah, list. That'll get you your ID, and then you can show.
Yep, so there's our list. Great. And then if we want, I don't need this clock VM storage account here for this. So we're going to be working with this one to delete, right? Would it be the diag? Yeah, that's the name. So I could do storage count delete. I'm guessing I'm going to give the name, and so that'll be clock VM's diag. Nope. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, so there you go. And so that's how we're going to delete that individual resource rather than the entire resource group. So let me just run through a few things that we're going to share for people for resources for today. So we've got an overview of the Cloud Shell. Let me go ahead and I'm going to send you a shortened version of this link. And I'm going to put this into our chat. I think that's going to be really useful for you. We're going to look at the quick start for the Bash shell. I think this is super useful as well. So let's pop that in there for you. And you can take a look at this entire Azure command line CLI, the documentation, all those little commandlets that like we were doing the help stuff for. Every single one of them is documented. And the thing that I love about this page are all the how-to guides and the samples. And then finally, if you want to learn just about anything about Azure, it's Microsoft Learn. This is your place to get pretty much education on almost anything Azure, tons of other stuff like Microsoft products, you name it. There's just so much, and it's free. And that to me is awesome. So Steve, why don't we go ahead and start wrapping things up? What do you think?
Sounds good, man. You covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to get rid of the extra me. I don't think we need this extra me here anymore. Although it was kind of cool. I wanted to play with like a 2-camera setup today just to see if I could do it. And hey, I could do it.
Yeah.
So Steve, let's wrap up by letting people know if they want to hear more from you, if they've got some stuff that they want to talk to you about, how do they contact you?
Twitter's best. That's the most accessible there. I'm at Stephen Murawski. I'm also on LinkedIn. Again, my name, Stephen Murawski. My blog is stephenmurawski.com, which I'm hoping to make more active very soon. But yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn are probably the quickest ways to get a hold of me.
Gotcha. Well, you know what? I really appreciate your time with me today. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. We're going to say goodbye, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me today. We got some.
It's been awesome.
Brett's always awesome. Everyone else watching, let's give Steve a good wave goodbye. Thanks a lot, Steve. Well, yeah. Hey, that's another Azure FunBytes. I really dug being part of this with y'all again. I think that one of the great things that we get to do every time we spend time together is just talk about Azure, talk about people, talk about the things we're up to. So I just really want to say thanks again for watching what I'm doing. If you'd like to be part of this stream, it's really easy. Why don't you go ahead and reach out to me at Azure FunBytes on Twitter. You can reach out in the comments on almost any of the places you're seeing this. YouTube, dev.to, tech community, IT ops blog. There's so many places you can get in touch with me. And so I just want you to know, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this stream today. Next week, we'll be right back with another stream, another Azure fundamental that we'll talk about. So until then, thanks a lot for watching. One more goodbye for Steve there. Anyway, till next time, we'll see you. Thanks a lot.